Monday, October 27, 2025. Today's video is about unwanted children versus becoming a responsible adult. And there's a wonderful distinction between being an unwanted child and not being wanted at all. And what I'm going to say is, when I was a little boy, my mother, she had already had 3 children. She had 2 daughters and a son. And when she found out she was pregnant with me, she wept, she cried. And she didn't cry because she didn't, quote unquote, want me. She didn't want the responsibility that having a child entailed. And that's something that I didn't really understand until I became a young adult. When I got to age 21, I had just gotten my badge, swore an oath of allegiance to defend the Constitution, and I became a firefighter at the age of 21. And I started making a lot of money. And for the women that I dated, I let them know all up front, I'm not planning on having children until I'm 35 years old. So I'm planning to have children at 35. I don't intend to disrupt this plan for anything. And the reason why was because I understood and knew, as most young adults and as most people that are probably by the age of 13 understand, raising a child requires more than just time. It requires a lot of money. And for anyone considering having a child and not having the provisions provided in advance of this child coming really makes no sense. But we see so many women, whether they're black women or Hispanic women or Asian women. In America, it seems to be okay to have a child in advance of having your financial house in order. So my mother cried when she found that she was pregnant with me, and I remember, I think at age 6, she told me, she said, Jerry, you were not planned. You were not wanted at the time. And I really totally misunderstood what she meant by that. And I think most children today that are born out of wedlock feel and carry this burden of guilt that they weren't wanted. And that really attacks a person's self-esteem. It attacks this notion of not being loved, not being desired, not being wanted. And it can really plague your mind, it can plague your spirit, especially when you're looking at those that brought you into this world. Both parents didn't want you. What do you mean? It doesn't make sense. But I would ask all the children and all the young adults to just think for a minute and grant your parents grace, especially the fathers. Because I would say, for the most part, many fathers were dragged into becoming fathers against their actual will and intentions. Most of these men were just looking to have good times, good sex. And if the woman proved to be of real value, and this is the part that is going to be hurtful to many women, but I would just say that if you're easy to get, meaning if you have a body count, then the value of your beauty, your sexuality, and even your fertility is very questionable. But we're all entitled to make mistakes. But I would say to lose your virginity before you're married is probably one of the greatest and grievous mistakes a woman can make, because you can't undo that, and you really don't know the impact it's going to have on your life. And instead of trying to make excuses to justify, to discount the impact of having sex with so many men, it's at your peril. It's at your peril. Because I've heard so many women talk about their experiences after they lost their virginity. And the guy that they lost their virginity to, the woman will say to their girlfriends, "Oh man, I love him. The sex is great." But some of these other women who've had multiple sex partners will turn around and say, "Well, how do you know?" It's very funny that I've heard this conversation pattern spoken to me by at least 10 women that I've had sex with in my life. At least 10. And these women were virgins at the time that I had sex with them. Most of them, I'd say maybe 4 out of the 10 weren't virgins. You know, I was very fortunate to be able to have sex with, 6 women that weren't virgins. But ultimately, these women succumbed to the temptation, the challenge that having sex with me isn't the best, and there's other guys that might be better. But all of that is just an invitation to be a hoe, to be a slut, to be an object of sexual desire. And on one hand, women would say they don't want to be seen as sexual objects by men. But all of these conversations contradict what they speak in public. And I would say the reason why they say these things in public is because it's politically correct. It's the right thing to say. But it's not accurate or correct if you don't believe that in your heart of hearts. It's when nobody's watching. If you are running around here having sex with guys because they're cute, because you find them sexually arousing, then you've actually become the very thing that you don't want to be. You're looking at these men as objects of sexual pleasure. You don't care what this man has in terms of his hopes and dreams. The only thing you want is to feel good when y'all hop into bed and have sex. And I would just say that was the attitude that was predominating the psychology of most women and predominating the psychology of women today in America. And it was so profound that even when I was in my early teens, I had the fortune of encountering Nigerian men. And these Nigerian men, some of them dated my sister. Both my sisters. And one of them, as I grew older, when I got to college years, they related to me that, we come to the United States for educational opportunities, financial opportunities, but we also come here because the reputation of the American woman, not just the black woman, the American woman, is that all you have to do is show signs of some type of success, and literally they'll be in your bed. No problem. No questions asked. And sure enough, it was proven. My former brother-in-law, God rest his soul, he dated my sister, and they ultimately got married. They never had kids, although supposedly he insisted that my sister have children, but my sister was not interested in having children with him. But the long and the short of it is, he didn't really care, because he knew later on down the road he would get divorced and he would marry an African woman, and then he'd start his family with her. And as sure enough, that's how it played out. They got divorced, and ultimately, this man married an African woman, returned to Africa, started a family, and unfortunately he died of cancer before his children were grown. But all of these things unfold to tell a story that should give a little insight to the children of these women, that your fathers didn't necessarily not want you. They just were not ready or prepared for the responsibility of having you in their lives would bring. And I'm just going to say that it's one thing to say you're not ready, but it's almost like that game hide and seek. You know, you do the countdown, and by the time the guy who's counting to go seek out the people, he'll say, ready or not, here I come. And to me, that's the situation that I personally encountered with my firstborn son. I was not married to their mother, and it was at a point where I really wanted to just run off and hide, and even insisted on the mother having an abortion. I insisted on it, but fortunately for my firstborn son, she didn't have the abortion. And ready or not, whether I was prepared financially or not, I had to get certain things in order, and that's just what I did. I got my mind in order to be a good father, and even though I wasn't married to their mother, I was going to be a loyal and faithful husband to her. Even though we may not have been married, I was going to be loyal and faithful, and I was. Didn't cheat on her, didn't do anything out of order from the day my firstborn son was born up to the day that I finally just said, I just can't tolerate this disrespect. I cannot tolerate the disobedience. If there were certain things that, as a result of being in a relationship, that I had no choice but to rely on my partner, my wife to do, my baby mama to do, it was impossible for me to be successful. And that's the exciting thing about being in a relationship, but that's the most horrific thing about being in a relationship, that you have to trust somebody, because if you don't, and they don't do what they're supposed to do, that's where you miss out on the real blessing of being in a marital relationship. And this has been the problem in the black culture for, I would say, at least 50 years. And I would just say that my mother's generation was the last, and it became almost like the floodgates opening up to where, you know, our communities were devastated by all these women having children out of wedlock. They're having sex with men that they know very little about, except they got good conversation, and they're bragging about how good the sex is going to be. And not only is the culture teaching and training these women to be promiscuous and to be whores, social media is teaching these women to do the same. And it's amazing that I see the impact on my own sons. It's a devastating thing to see it on the young girls, but it's even far worse when I see it on my own children. You know, my oldest son, he makes videos where he's trying to portray this image of struggle, that, you know, that the world was against him, his father didn't love him, and all of this. And I'm just scratching my head to say, you know, that's a far cry from what was actually going down. I would say that, you know, in all honesty, I was the only one that truly did love you, because I sacrificed, you know, my own desires to be the role model that you in latter years could be proud of. I can't say the same thing for their mother, but that's something for him and his mother to work out. The only thing I can do is just remind my son that you need to just keep on living. Life is going to teach you some valuable lessons. And he's starting to see these lessons unfold before his very eyes. You know, he's dating women that are cut from the same cloth as his mother. And the culture is teaching him that he's too feminine. And I'm like, no, you're not too feminine. You're dealing with savagery. You're dealing with barbarism. And there's just no other way to say it, because family is the highest social order that a human being can embark and undertake. It's far more sophisticated than business, because the real payoff is priceless. But getting back to the whole ultimate message of this story is that to be an unwanted child is a far cry from being an unloved or a child that the parent wasn't prepared to deal with. But you don't judge what somebody said in advance of something happening. You say, or you evaluate them in terms of how they performed in the presence, in the confrontation of that situation. And I would say that I did a pretty good job, but I damn sure didn't do as good a job as my father had demonstrated. My father was able to put all 4 of the children that he brought into the world with my mother through private school, while at the same time amassing a real estate fortune amounting to over $800,000. I wasn't able to do any of those things, but I definitely was able to be a good father in terms of showing my children that to go to work and come home and to share the fruits of your labor is the bare minimum of what a father should do for a child, whether it be a child born out of wedlock or one born within wedlock. And I did that. But the challenge for me now is to illustrate to my children, you want to turn your nose up to me, you want to look down on me, and you want to, say I should have done more. Well, the challenge I would have for them is to put themselves in my shoes. Are you in a position to where you can take care of yourself along with taking care of a family? Are you in a position to do those things? And if you are, then you can talk and tell me how and what I should have done. But until you get to that level of being able to provide and take care of yourself, you don't have the right to say anything concerning what it took and what it takes for a man to be a true husband and a true father. And that's the one thing I'm going to challenge every young man that happens to hear this video. Before you start being critical of your father's failures or his incompetence, are you even at the level of being able to do the things that he's doing for yourself? And if not, shame on you. Take care, guys.